dangerous large carnivore out there.
Yeah, I saw that bird took a young deer off the road and fly away.
And it was just about getting dark, and we started panicking, running down this ridge, not really having any clue what was throwing rocks in our vicinity, good-sized rocks. And I stopped long enough to get a 357 out of my backpack and look back, and that's when I saw it. I saw one.
For a week, the town of Defiance was being harassed by a werewolf. And it's actually attacked two railroad workers, killed livestock, just a lot of weird stuff that was going on.
Good Sunday evening, Monster Xers. This is your host, Gunnar Monson, along with my good friend, Shane Hardcore Corson. Shane, how are you today?
I am doing well. Good as always, Gunnar. Glad to be here back on Monster X Radio. Once again, looking forward to another great show with Chris Spencer.
Yeah, I wanted to do a shout out to all our new members on our Facebook page. It's been a busy week. Like almost 1,000 people have joined Monster X this week. So I wanted to say thanks, and thanks for joining us. And we endeavor to put on a good show for you today, and as every week. So a little bit of housekeeping for new members. I do want to let you know if we are very much flesh and blood. We believe that there is a Bigfoot creature out there. We don't know exactly what it is, of course, but we are definitely, we respectfully agree to disagree with our friends that believe that they have paranormal abilities. So if that's what you're looking for, you're not going to find it here. So I just want to be upfront about that. Coming up shortly is the Sasquatch Summit, hosted by Johnny Manson in Ocean Shores, Washington, on November 20th and 21st. If you are, there are still time to get tickets. In fact, I've got, I think, 3 extra ones. So if you are interested in going, I've got 3 admission tickets to Ocean Shores that I will give to the first 3 people, or first person who needs 3 tickets, if you Facebook message me on our group page. So with that being said, I know you'll see occasionally stuff on our Facebook group page from Sasquatch Coffee. That is I am the founder, Sasquatch Coffee. Sasquatch Coffee also sponsors Monster X, so I try not to overdo it with promoting the coffee on the page, but I do. There is a Facebook page for Sasquatch Coffee, and if you want to buy Sasquatch Coffee, it's at www.squatchcoffee.com. So enough said about that. I'm excited to talk to our guest today, Chris Spencer, who is a Bigfoot researcher out of Washington State. Chris is fairly new to Bigfoot research, but he is really active and goes out very regularly and researches in the same area, and has produced a lot of, found some really interesting stuff. So that being said, I'm ready. Chris or Shane, you got anything else you want to talk about right now?
I think let's just bring Chris on. I know he's got a lot to say and a lot to share, and somebody I respect. I've gotten to know him over, say the last year and a half, and he's just a fantastic individual, really nice guy, and is honest to all get out. He makes no outrageous claims, and is doing his work out there diligently and honestly. And that's all I can ask for. I think that's all that anybody could really ask for. And so, let's bring him aboard.
Hey, Chris, this is Gunner.
Hey, Gunner.
And I know Shane's there with me here. So, how are you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing good.
And you were out this weekend. It sounded like you posted that you had a little bit of audio mishap.
Oh yeah, I'm working in Eastern Oregon right now, so I run home on the weekends, and Saturdays I try to run up to my area and do an audio. And I was in a rush yesterday, and when I dropped the audio off, I turned the recorder on, and with the Tascam you have to hit the record button twice. Well, I only hit it once, so my recorder sat out all night in the rain on standby.
That sucks. I've done the exact same thing not too long ago, and it was bad when went back because we had some stuff on one of the other recorders that picked up some interesting stuff, and we had hoped to have it picked up on both recorders, but I had done the same thing and not pushed the start button twice, so. We find that kind of stuff happens when you're out there in the field.
Oh yeah, I just recently started using multiple recorders, and for whatever reason yesterday I just decided to put one out, partly because I wanted to get out of the rain. It's pretty stormy, so maybe it worked out for the better, because there probably would have been much to record but rain and wind.
And tell us a little bit about yourself. You're pretty new to Bigfooting, relatively new, and what got you interested and started? Because you spent a lot of time out in the field. So, what brought you into it?
Well, I'm new to the whole Bigfoot researching thing. I'm not new to the subject. I grew up here in Washington State. I actually grew up in Longview, and basically, I've had some weird stuff happen in life, and the last couple years, a profound thing happened with me and my son in 2013 when we were camping. And last year, I just decided I had time. I decided to devote time to actually going out and looking for evidence or looking for these things. It started when I was about 6 or 7. Me and my dad found some tracks up by Packwood, Washington. We had a cabin up there, and we were cutting wood for the cabin in the early spring, and my dad had stopped over a clear cut to take pictures of Packwood, and I got out, and there was a trackway up the side of the road that dove off down the side of the clear cut, and there were big footprints with toes, and I don't remember the details because I was pretty young. I just remember my dad's reaction, and I yelled at my dad, "Hey, Dad, Bigfoot," and he came over and was like, "Well, it's a hunter," and I, being the kid I am, I just pointed out, "Well, he's hunting without shoes on, Dad," and after that, he was like, "Get in the truck," and my dad's a huge skeptic about everything, and it noticeably disturbed him when he saw those tracks. And after that, I didn't think much about it. I went to WSU, and spring of '92, I had an Anthropology 101 class, and one day I came in, and there was this giant skull on my professor's counter. My professor was Grover Krantz, and I had no idea who he was. But he devoted one lecture a semester, evidently, to the topic of Sasquatch, and I happened to get to sit in on it. It was pretty cool. It was the same year he came out with Big Footprints, and basically the lecture was like an overview of what that book is. He covered, he was a physical anthropologist. His expertise was in bipedal motion and bone structures. He actually created the Gigantopithecus skull that everybody sees on TV, using dimensions and mathematics that anthropologists use to kind of figure out what bodies look like. And so it was a cool lecture, but I think the most profound thing about the lecture is he had a copy of the Patterson-Gimlin film, and he went over that. And up until that time, I was 19. I kind of agreed with my dad that, it's a guy in a monkey suit. But when I left that lecture, I fully believed that was a real animal in that film, after hearing Krantz talk about it. So, pretty much after that, I was very interested in the subject. Life went on, and I read whatever books came out and watched whatever shows were on TV a bit. And I don't know, around 2011, I was fishing. I'm in a bass club, and me and a guy from my club were fishing on Rife Lake in September, and we were on the southern shore, which borders the Gifford Pinchot National Forest. And Rife Lake is near Morton, and as most people know, that's a hot spot in Washington for activity. It's also near Packwood, where me and my dad found the tracks. But we were fishing one afternoon, and for about 45 minutes, something paralleled us on shore. And my partner, I asked my partner if he heard it, and he was like, it's probably elk. And I just thought it was odd because it sounded like one animal to me. And he both were, it's probably elk, but I kept saying, that sounds like one critter. But anyways, we got to a creek, started catching some smallmouth, and fixed that out, and then decided we were going to drop the big motor and move. And right about that time, my partner had just told me, he's like, there's another guy in our club. His son had reportedly seen a Sasquatch running down the shore in the same area a couple of years prior to this. And he was kind of telling me about that, and we were kind of laughing about it. And just before he started that motor, 2 wood knocks. And, that's the first time I ever even thought about a wood knock. And I, that stuck in my mind. And, you asked the guy I was fishing with today, he still laughs about it. He was like, yeah, whatever. And then in 2013, me and my son decided to, my son wanted to go camping. He was 13 years old, and it was his spring break. He'd been hounding me all winter, and that was probably our last cold winter. We still had a good amount of snow up in the hills around springtime, and it was April 5th. It was raining over here, and I said, we'll go camping. We'll head east, and we headed up 14, and we actually we stopped at the Skamania County campground there. It's right off Highway 14. There's maybe 10 acres of forest right there. It's right on the Columbia River. And that campground's closed from October 31st through April 1st, so we were pretty much the first people there. We were the only people there. We set up camp right on the river and did a little exploring. There was a trail that ran up the river on the shore, and we walked back up that trail from our camp, and you could see where somebody had come down the bank towards the shore. There's some slide tracks, and then there was one track in the middle. They're old tracks, but and pretty degraded, but one in the middle that you can make out, and it was pretty big, and my son had jokingly said, "Oh, Bigfoot, Dad," because it was a large track, and I kind of laughed. I took a picture of it, and we followed that back up into the timber, and it ran into another trail that goes back to the campground. And we got in the timber, and I noticed there was all these freshwater clamshells back along this trail, and they're all just pried open. They weren't chewed on, and they were in the timber, which I took note of because, the crows, the raccoons, otter, there's a number of animals that eat the freshwater clams on the Columbia, and they're usually you find them cracked and chewed up or broken down by shore, and you don't find them just open and cleaned out in the timber. So I kind of took note of that, and as we got closer to our camp, we kind of came around a little bend in the trail, and there was a fresh limb twist. It was a vine maple that had been twist broke and pushed behind a fir tree. It's about 6 feet up, and I looked at that and was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Human could have done it. And then we just kind of started really looking around, and right under that limb twist, the ground was mainly fir needles and leaves and stuff, but there was a very fresh impression right below that limb twist that measured 18 inches by 9 inches, and you could see kind of toes in it. And then there were some other trees that were knocked down, a little fir tree that had a 3-inch base on it, maybe 20 foot tall. It was just pushed over some other older trees that were broken, and me and my kid got kind of excited. We were like, wow. And we looked very closely on our way back to camp, and we found another impression that measured about the same in the leaves that kind of went off the trail. It was 18 by 9 inches, and they're ambiguous. They're impressions in the ground, but they're shaped like a foot. And so we were excited about it. We got back to camp. It was the afternoon. We went fishing for a bit, came back, roasted hot dogs. It was a nice day. It was overcast most of the day, and it kind of started sprinkling. So I'd put up tarps. I had 2 tarps tied between trees over our tent. And my son went to bed around 9:30. And, of course, it's dark. We're the only ones in the campground. And I started thinking about what we found, and I will fully admit I started getting creeped out. And I went to bed about an hour after my son, he's one of those kids. He will lay down and fall asleep anywhere instantly. We actually climbed St. Helens about a month ago, and he took a nap at the top of freaking St. Helens while we were waiting for a buddy to summit. But he was snoring, and I don't know, at one point in the night I awoke to movement around our camp, and I was instantly afraid more than I've ever been. And I was armed. I had a .44 pistol with me, but I couldn't get myself to peek out of the tent, and I heard branch breaking, and I don't know how long I laid there. I started to kind of drift off, and then something pulled on those tarps above my tent, and I sat up and I cursed and woke up my son, and I told him to go back to sleep, and which he did, and I wasn't going back to sleep after that, and it was very quiet for quite a while, and I don't know how much time passed, but it happened again, and this time I hit the panic button on my Jeep, and it set off the horn and the lights. Woke my son up again, told him it was nothing. I hit the button by accident, and, he went back to sleep, and I pretty much laid there for the rest of the night. I'd hear movement around the camp every so often. I heard some splashing down by the water. At one point I looked at my cell phone. It was around 4 o'clock in the morning, and about that time I heard 2 wood knocks very close to our tent. And then after that, that feeling of absolute fear that I had pretty much dissipated, and I got out of the tent, built up a fire, and I waited for my son to wake up. And I told him what had transpired the night before, and he's like, I don't really want to spend the night here again, Dad. And I'm like, we're not. And we packed up and we left. But after that, I was pretty much convinced that there's something out there, and I want to look for it. And that's kind of what's led me to where I'm at now. So.
Yeah,
sorry if I rambled on.
Oh no. You know what? As far as the show goes, that's what we want. We want guests to, that's why guests are invited onto the show. People don't want to hear from us. They want to hear from the guests. So,
I was just going to say that. Yeah, people don't call them or listen to Monster X to listen to Shane and I run on. But
yeah. But yeah, it's I about this time last year I went through a divorce in 2014, and it was actually about August 2014. I started hiking a lot. I devoted a lot of time to hiking, and I hiked all over different areas up the gorge in Skamania County and the what would be like Lava Canyon and over by the Ape Caves and stuff. And I'd actually gotten to a point by January I was like, there's nothing out there. Because, but I didn't realize, in the back of my mind, well, I'm hiking where everybody else hikes. There's usually a lot of people where I was hiking. And around February, I got laid off at the end of February. And we had such a mild winter last year. It was like in the 50s. I mean, there was no snow up by St. Helens. And at the end of February, there's an area up Cuda River that I know where the elk winter, and I was going to go check it out for antler sheds. Figured maybe they start shedding a little early because of the weather, and on top of it, I had in the back of my mind, well, if I was a large predator, I'd probably be around the elk. So I went into this area by myself, and at the end of February, and I found X structure, I guess you'd call it, just two trees that were deliberately put between some living trees. And that's how I found my spot, and I just started hiking around that area pretty much every week, multiple times a week for the last year. Started doing some overnight recording in March, and it was about the end of March that I actually got something other than known animals that interested me. It was a really large wood knock, and it happened about 7 o'clock in the evening. And actually on my recorder you hear some elk doing some location chirping, and then it goes quiet, and then it sounds like someone takes a baseball bat to a tree. And that was my first indication that I might have found an area that had activity. So,
right. Yeah.
And it's just,
Chris, in regards to the, this X formation, obviously you're not going to jump out and say, oh, Sasquatch did that. No. But was there anything prior or since you noticed that stick X formation? Is there anything else that you could report about that? Anything new? Has there been anything abnormal found around that area?
Yeah, I can. What's happened is basically, I started doing recordings, and I'm picking up some unusual stuff on the recordings. And around into April, the elk really started moving into the area and hanging out into the area. At that point, I had one game camera up there, and I was starting to get a lot of pictures of the elk on that game camera. And I actually was recording, at that point, I was recording close to where that first X structure I found was. And I actually caught at 6:30 in the morning. Well, I put it out just for an overnight on a Saturday, and when I went back in Sunday to pick it up, as I walked by the X structure, one of the logs was broken. And the way it was set up, it's not like it was not like an animal could have run through and just hit the log and broke it. You would have had to put some force on it to break this log. And I actually, when I listened to that overnight recorder at 6:30 in the morning, you hear the branches shaking, and then you hear crack. I don't know if it's it, but I'm assuming because it was close enough to it that was the X structure being broken. And I was about 45 minutes after that, I had picked up two wood knocks that I find suspect. That was April, and then some other stuff happened that I'm sure we'll talk about. But as far as X structures go, in June, I think it was June 6th, I'd taken Barbara Alvera with me up there, and we walked into an area where we have let me back up. Also in April, we started finding elk skulls in trees. The first couple we found, we just wrote it off as other people hiking around the area being smart. The problem is the third one we found, or actually it was the second one we found, really was in an area that I have a hard time believing there was other people walking into. And then we found a third one, and then we found a fourth one down in the valley where once again, it'd be a stretch that somebody happened to be walking down there like us, doing what we're doing. And then finally in May, we found a fifth one, and it was actually up closer to where I actually park. And all these skulls in these trees are found on marshes or a water source. And so I told Barbara about it, and we had met at, actually, I went to the Olympic Project's expedition in May, and that's where we met. And so she came up in June to check the place out with me, and we walked in there. I was going to show her this fifth X because it was the closest to us. I was going to show her this skull that's sitting in the tree, and we got into it, and me and my partner had been in there, had found it 2 weeks before this. And we came in, and there was a brand new X structure there. It wasn't there when me and my partner were there. And it's just like the original X structure that I found, but it'd been recently done. It'd been done in that 2 week time frame, which found odd. I think it was the next week, and I took Todd Neese and his wife in, and
Diane,
Diane, and we were pictures of the skull and the tree, and the week after that, I went in by myself, and that skull had been taken out of the tree. It wasn't taken out by me. I don't know who did it. And after that, I went down into the other marsh, which is probably about 2 miles away, where there's a skull that was actually stuck on a stick, and this stick was stuck in the ground. And me and my partner went down into that area, and that had been knocked down. So, and we found bone piles, especially in March. We found a lot of bone piles because you don't have a lot of the ground cover, so you can see better. But these bone piles are unusual just in the fact that almost the entire animal is there. They're not spread out. I found one bone pile that actually has a cow skull and a calf skull with it, so you have two animals piled up. And they're always around these marshes. So I'm not saying that it's Sasquatch, but it's unusual. So,
Chris, in regards to the skulls, though, I got a few questions for you, just because it's an interesting subject. You're finding these skulls in this area, so either it almost screams that it's the same person or entity that's doing it, because you're finding them in a close spot. So if it's human, it's the same. The chances are it's probably the same person, or if it's a Sasquatch, then there you go. But the skulls, any irregularities? I mean, are these skulls like any? Is there any meat on them? How old were they in appearance? What was? Are they all placed? Beside the one on the stick, whereabouts in the tree are they placed, and how are they placed on the tree?
They're all pretty much hanging on them. They're all pretty much bleach white. They're old. There's no skin on them. They're not like recent kills or anything like that. All of them are cow skulls except for one. So there's 4 cow skulls, and then there's 1 bull skull. I'm suspect of the bull skull because it's in the tree, but it's fairly low to the ground, and it's not positioned like the others. And I'm almost suspect that maybe a critter or an animal drug it up into the tree. But the other 4 are cow skulls, and they're deliberately placed with on a branch, so they're on the tree, positioned the same way with the nose pointing down, and they're all about 6 foot up.
Gotcha.
The one skull where the new X structure was actually, there was a tree that had fallen between 2 other trees, and it was placed on top of that between the branches, and it was about 6 feet up. So, but I tried to, I guess there's some differences in all of them. The two of them are pretty. I mean, they're all about 6 feet up, including the one that was stuck on a stick was stuck in the ground about 6 feet up. That's all. They're all deliberate. The only one that I'm suspect of that could be something where a bobcat or whatever drug it up in the tree would be the bull skull, because it's maybe 3.5 feet off the ground, and it's in the branches, and it's kind of cattywampus. It doesn't, it might be deliberate, it might not be. So
right, but your general opinion is that something picked these up and placed them on the branch or the tree.
Oh, yeah, definitely. With 4 of them, absolutely, positively. They're deliberately done. Either a human did it or something else.
Right, yeah.
So.
And that's fascinating. I mean, this area, like you were saying, there's a lot of elk, and you've been tracking the elk in this area. I've seen some of your trail cam pictures, and I've seen the elk and the cows and the bulls and whatnot. There's obviously a lot of, they do come through there, and sometimes for extended periods of time. So it's interesting. And you find them near marshes. So there's a water source.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yep.
That's actually very interesting. But, it's a great find. It shows that you're really going out and studying this area.
Yeah, it's a really neat area, actually. There's 6. All these marshes are spring fed. The whole hillside here is, because I'm up on the hill. I'm not actually in the valley, and the whole hillside is full of these springs. And like I've told my buddies, man, I have elk hunting friends, and I'm like, go on Google Earth and find yourself. You can look at Google Earth and you find a patch of cottonwood and alder, and odds are there's a spring there or a marsh there, and that's where you want to find an elk. The elk will go out of their way for spring-fed water over a creek or a stream or a lake. They'll go to springs. And actually, I have several of my I have 5 game cameras now, and around August, the bulls are getting in the mood, and they start creating these wallows, and that's where I have several of the game cameras on these wallows in these marsh areas, and they kind of create these pools, and other critters come in and drink out of them now, and so it's cool. Yeah. I mean, aside from the mystery of what else could be up there, I enjoy just the wildlife that's up there,
Absolutely.
We always run into wildlife. The elk have actually, since July, have pretty much stayed within a 5-mile radius of the area that I'm hiking around. Since July, I have not been going out exploring like I did before. I've kind of kept to a regular route and going in and checking the cameras and setting out audio, just because I do believe, my personal opinion is I do believe there's Sasquatch in the area, and I just been maintaining this kind of regularity because we've had a couple instances where I believe that they were very close to me. So,
and in regards to your audio, you collect a lot of audio, and you send. I know a lot of the audio stuff you find fascinating. You post in groups and whatnot, but you also you vet it through David Ellis and whatnot. But this audio, any of this particular, any of your recorded audio, what sticks out to you, and what have you recorded multiple times?
Most recently, in basically September, 3 weekends in a row, I recorded what I call bellow or creepy moan. And I record wood knocking a lot. It's been August and September were extremely active. And then, recently, 2 weeks ago, I get those whistling. I had a whistling encounter in May. Me and my partner were actually hiking into the area to pick up my overnight recorder, and something for about a half an hour whistled in the timber close to us, and my overnight recorder picked that up, and then I haven't gotten any whistles like that since that event until my last recording something came close to my recorder and was whistling very similarly. And it's not a bird, it's not an elk. The closest I can say, it sounds like a human whistle, but
right.
The most recent one, the whistles are pretty powerful, pretty long. I can't whistle, and you have to be have some lungs on you to do the whistles that I recently recorded. That's, that I was really excited this last recording just because since the whistling experience in May, I've been like, well, if they're whistling, they've got to do it more than once, dang it. So
right.
When it happened again this last recording, I was like, okay, cool. Now I've got something. So the event with me and my partner, when we were up there, we were the only people in there. There's only one way in there. If there's somebody else in there, we would have known. And it was just odd. It really sounded like there was another person down in the timber whistling, and it was a weird experience. And we'd actually, after we picked up the recorder, we debated, do we go towards the whistles or do we go the other way? And we decided to go the other way and see if they followed us. And, of course, the whistling completely stopped when we went the other direction.
Gotcha.
So
sounds like August and September are really good months up there. But, is this an area you think that they may hunker down in, or do they travel through it? How big an area are we talking about?
Well, I'm just going into a small area. And for whatever reason, there's pretty much been activity nonstop since July. But elk have been in there. I mean, I was in there 2 weekends ago, and the elk are still there. I went in there yesterday. I didn't see elk, but every time I've gone in there, the elk have been present. We usually run right into them. I'm still up in the air on that. When I first started going up there, I had all these hypotheses that the elk were going to come in and then move on. And what happened is the elk came up out of the valley in April, and they basically stayed in the area. And really, I've picked up something on my recorders almost every recording since April. It's part of the whole Toutle River Valley, and I have no doubt that whatever's there is going to utilize that whole valley. Right now, there's a lot of hunters up there, and things have gone really quiet, and for obvious reasons, because the hunters. So I'm sure they move in and out of the area, but I'm up in the air. I'll see what my recordings bring next year when I can compare notes, because I almost feel like now maybe some of these silence that I encountered, March through April, was due to us walking around, and now that we've kind of made our presence non-threatening presence, maybe more stuff has happened because they're more comfortable with our presence. I don't know. I'm up in the air on that. I don't think they necessarily are there year round, but it sure kind of looks like it right now, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. At least they're in the general vicinity, it sounds like. If it is indeed Sasquatch, it sounds like they're in the general vicinity. But I mean, if you had a month to say you had a month to spend a month out there, what month would you pick? I mean, with the amount of time you've been out there, I know it's kind of short, but and you go out there regularly though. If you had a month, what month would you pick to hunker down out there? September,
definitely.
Yeah.
Because September, I mean, ridiculous amounts of woodknocks, and Barbara Vera and Courtney Hinterland. Courtney is a member of the BFRO. They're kind of become a part of my team. I guess I got a team now. So they spent the night twice up there. And the 2 times they spent the night up there, they didn't hear anything themselves personally, but my recorders picked up some crazy wood knocking when in the mornings when they were leaving camp, and that's also the time frame when I got those bellows, the bellowing.
Mm-hmm.
So
You're
yeah,
talking
September.
Early morning hours.
Yeah, the bellows generally I got them between 4 and 6 in the morning, and then I also got several bellows in the evening between 10 and midnight. So they're early morning and late evening is when I've gotten those bellows. And the wood knocking is generally, it seems anywhere from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning. But I've gotten some pretty intense wood knocking all the way up to 11 o'clock in the morning too.
Uh-huh.
So, and one of those times was when Barbara and Courtney had been up there. Actually, it was the first time they were up there. There was wood knocking going on very close to my recorder. One of the knockers was very, very close to my recorder. But if you listen to it, I count what I believe at least 6 individuals at different distances from my recorders knocking back and forth to each other.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me what, a lot of people don't realize this. I mean, only those that really go out and record audio or nature, whether Sasquatch related or not, is how much audio, and not necessarily depending on the audio piece you use. I use Tascams mostly. We use Zooms as well, but how much you don't hear that is actually recorded on audio. I mean, it could be coyotes, for example. There's been times when I've been out there and I've placed audio out there, and I've been, a couple hundred yards away from the audio, and it's recorded coyotes or knocks, and you don't hear it in person, but your audio picks it up, and you're like, how did I not hear that?
I have one clip that's one of my. I have another friend that's been kind of going with me lately, and one clip is his favorite. It's actually it happened at the end of August. My partner and my son and I were going in to pick up my overnight recorder, and actually where I have one recording area, and I mean, it sounds crazy, but I know I don't try to hide my stuff, and whatever's doing this stuff knows my recorder's there and has gone right up to my recorder. And we were on our way in, and it's actually an area where we found what I believe is a bed, too. But we were on our way in to get that in the morning, and my son, he's 16, and he's rattling away. He's always talking, and as we're coming in, we didn't hear anything, but when I listened to the recorder that afternoon after we got back, something was right next to the recorder and whacked the hell out of a tree. You hear it whack a tree, a stick go flying, hit a branch, and then you hear my voice in the distance.
Gotcha.
And we didn't hear it when we were up there. It's kind of disturbing.
It can be very disturbing depending on what's recorded, especially when it's in close proximity to you and the recorder. You never heard it. I agree.
Yeah. We did hear it one time, me and my son. In September, we went in on a very windy day. It was just me and him. And there's a main log and gated road that we hike into, and then we take off an old trail to get to this recording area. And just as we turn to go on that old trail, it's really windy, and my son had said, "Dad, I feel sketchy about this." And my kid is a jokester. He usually when he's up there, he's just kind of, I got to go with Dad up there. And he was all kind of freaked out, and I chalked it up as just the wind, because the wind was kind of scary. And we got down to my area, and we're just you go through a little marsh area, and then you go into the timber where I have a stump that I record off of. And as we were coming into the timber, a cow elk, maybe 20 feet from us, jumped up and ran straight south of us. And at that point, it dawned on me. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're coming in upwind. The wind was blowing into our face. So this elk, she never heard us and she didn't smell us. So we spooked her, and she ran straight down south of us. And 4 minutes later, I get to my recording stump, and I'm just setting up my recorder right where that elk had just ran. Whack, whack, 2 loud wood knocks. And my kid's like, I think it's time to leave, Dad. And I'm like, well, could have been the wind. It was not the wind. 2 minutes after that, whatever it was came within 20. They were within 20 yards of us to our east, and they hit another branch against the tree. And at that point, I'd got the recorder set up, and we left. I actually yelled, "We're leaving now!" And yeah, that my son's he's real quiet when we go in there now. After that, that freaked him out a little bit because it was, I mean, definitely not the wind.
Right.
So.
Any thoughts, Chris, on, you've had, you originally went out there, I guess your partner is male. Any thoughts on having females out there? Do you see an increase of noise or activity or anything like that, having, Barb and whatnot out there?
Just for the 2 times that they've spent the night up there, the wood knocking was more intense. I can't. That's another thing that we'll have to see what happens in the future. Me and Barb kind of have some ideas, and of having her and Courtney go in, just them for a day, or us as a group for a day. I just know when the 2 times they spent the night up there, those were some of the most intense recordings for wood knocking that I've had, and we actually wanted the last night that they spent the night up there. Courtney came down. She lives up in Seattle. She came down before Barb got here, so we went in and placed recorders about 5:00, and it sounds kind of creepy, but Courtney had brought some urine from one of her pregnant coworkers, and we placed that near my recorder just to see what would happen. And we went back up to the parking area, and we waited for Barb to get there. Barb got there, and I helped walk them into where they camp. And I have them camp about a half a mile away from where I actually record, because where I record is where most of the activity has occurred. And so as they were setting up camp, it was about 7:00 by that time. I could have sworn that I heard a wood knock. And of course, when you're talking with people, there's, like you said earlier, you if you're not paying attention, you miss stuff. Well, I thought I heard a wood knock, and sure enough, when I listened to that recording, not only did I hear a wood knock, but that wood knock came from right next to the recorder, and whatever did it maintained a presence around my recorder most that night. There would be nothing, and then all of a sudden, crack, a big break, or heavy footsteps. And I've recorded elk and deer. I've had the elk come by and graze right next to my recorder, and they make a lot of noise. And when they're moving through the woods, you'll hear the heavy steps from the elk and stuff when they're really moving. And this night, the steps were definitely bipedal in my opinion, and they were just out of the blue, a crack. It wasn't like, because you can hear the elk as they're getting closer to my recorder and as they get away from the recorder, and they're noisy. They sound like I heard a cow coming through. But these noises are subtle. I hear a lot of subtle movement, and then you'll hear light, kind of subtle movement, and then all of a sudden, whack, whack, and it's, I don't know. It's either a person doing it or something else with hands. So, anyways.
Yeah. Have you thought about placing, and maybe you've done this, I don't know, and it may be a deterrent or not, depending on your outlook, but have you thought about placing a trail cam near where you place the recorder? If something's kind of approaching the recorder, and these recorders, they give off, almost all of them give off, there's a little red light on them. So, sometimes, I vary how I place my recorder. Sometimes I leave them obvious. Sometimes I bury them. Sometimes I hide the red light. But they do give off a glow. And if you're a nocturnal creature, you can try and hide that glow. But for something that does hunting at night per se or whatnot, they're probably going to see it. But have you, with some of the activity around these recorders, have you tried maybe placing a trail cam around them?
Yep. Actually, what's funny is, see, back in April at the recording after I got my first wind knock, it was early April, late March. I had placed my recorder very near where I do most of my recording now, and like you said, at that time I wasn't using the extra battery pack, so there was just the one red light. But if you use those, I have the extra extended battery packs on my Tascams now. If you do that, then the whole screen is basically lit up the whole time that battery pack is going. And I just left it out because I just assumed, well, if they're up here, they're watching me leave this stuff anyways. And that recording, I had some interesting stuff happen. I recorded a weird, like a moan, but later on in the evening, I think it was around 9:30, out of nowhere, you hear, and it sounds just like a rock hitting the tree next to my recorder, and you hear the rock kind of fall through the branches, and it hits the tree with a lot of force. And when I hear that recording, my first thought is something just threw a rock at the recorder. And after that, I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to try to hide these. I built a little lean-to over the top of them to keep rain off them, but I really don't try to hide them. And I think it was around June, I decided I need to put a camera on the damn recorder. And I did that for several recordings, and I got distant stuff, but the stuff that was happening very near the recording stopped. I don't know. So I have actually a game camera in the general vicinity of where I record on the main trail that goes into where I record. I have actually 3 game cameras kind of covering that area where the elk move a lot, and I've gotten coyote too. But I stopped putting the camera directly on the recording because I like getting stuff that gets close to my recorder, and every time I put the camera on the recorder, nothing comes near my recorder. I don't know why that is. I don't know what that means. I don't know what they're seeing. I really liked you guys' show last week. You guys were talking about the game camera thing. I don't know if there's something the game cameras put off. I just know my experience every time I put a game camera directly on the recorder, nothing comes close to it. So I don't know what's up with that.
No, and that's something to know. I mean, it's very interesting. You know, I still use trail cameras, so I love pictures of nature in general. It doesn't have to be Sasquatch, though I would love Sasquatch to walk up and,
right.
high-five my trail cam. But it's interesting to note that that's what you're getting if it's Sasquatch or not. Trail cameras are usually placed on trees. They're usually, even the smallest ones, rather large.
Right.
And they kind of stick out like a sore thumb. When you place audio, usually lay it flat. Some people put them on trees, bungee cord them. Some people cover them up. They're relatively small,
right.
And, maybe there is something there. I mean, one would almost assume that there is something there, though there are some trail cam pictures that I found very interesting. And that's why I needed to do it. Yeah.
I will say this. And I have cheap cameras because I can't afford the expensive stuff. I've got just the basic stealth cam model, and they take good pictures. I have a bushnell. The elk knock that bushnell out of the tree all the time. They hear it or smell it, or there's something about that bushnell. They notice it. They pretty much ignore the stealth cams. But I do get a lot of pictures of just the forest. So there's a delay with those cameras, and sometimes they get triggered, and you don't always catch what triggered them. And if I get a lot of pictures, a lot of times, I'll get 10 pictures of just the forest, and this will be in the mornings and in the evenings. And there's been, I've had a couple instances on nights where I was recording where I had a lot of what I thought was activity going on, and I had a lot of nighttime pictures of just the trail and the forest with nothing in it. Mm-hmm. So,
Chris, you bring up a fantastic point. One that's not talked about a lot is that your average researcher, hunter, enthusiast, well, let's face it, trail cameras, the really high-end ones, are expensive. We're talking $400+ for one trail camera, like a reconnaissance, what the Limit Project uses. And so the cheaper versions, and I use a lot of them, trust me, the time delay, I get the same thing. A lot of pictures of nothing. You get a lot of pictures just, something triggered it, but what? You don't see it. It's passed by. It's too late. And so for, I guess, an argument for why don't we have a picture of Sasquatch, I venture to say 90% of the trail cameras out there are the cheap ones because, most people are using them just to get a picture of deer that will, kind of trot by or eat in front of your trail camera or whatnot.
Yep.
But, so the trigger delay is it's slow and you miss a lot of the action. And it is really a needle in a haystack. If you have a lot of these expensive ones out there and had the money, maybe perhaps you'd get something more, or at least figure out what's triggering those. Other than, and I'm, trial by error. When I first started using trail cameras, I put them in everywhere. And guess what? I put them in areas where there's bushes in front of the trail camera, and guess what? Wind blows, triggers the trail camera.
I have those. I have some great bird pictures too. I've got pretty good because I've gotten to know the area, and that was my goal anyways when I started up there. Is I wanted to get to know the area and animals in the area, and so I've gotten pretty good at picking where I put the cameras now, and I pretty much regularly get the elk. I can kind of track where they're moving and what part of the area the elk are in at any given point now, and I plan on getting some more. I probably won't. It'll be a while before I get an expensive camera. The cheap ones, I look at them as this is how I'm going to track the elk and the other game in the area. And, I'd like to have a couple more because I have a good idea where the elk are going to and from right now. And, I like getting the pictures of the elk. There's a beautiful bull up there. There's 4 different bulls up there, and there's one really nice one. And, I got some good recordings of him bugling too, which I really like, so.
And you know what? That's fantastic. I mean, what you're doing is real research to me because you're really, we can't say definitively, that Sasquatch hunts elk or deer. We hypothesize it being a possible, predator out there. But yet you're tracking the possible food sources, and you're getting to know where they're at given times, what they're doing. To me, that's awesome and key, very key, if you're trying to find this elusive thing.
I tend to believe also it's not necessarily I believe that if there is a Sasquatch that they're definitely going to be preying on elk and deer, that they're just too massive of a creature not to be taking in a high protein source. But I also believe that, look at elk, they're huge animals too. I think if there's a Sasquatch, they probably eat the same stuff the elk do. So if the elk are in an area grazing on a certain type of food source, so why wouldn't these guys be doing the same thing?
Right. That's a great point. We were up at our Tillamook site recently, and now this time of year it's like chanterelle season. You go out and pick chanterelle stuff. Well, we were noticing a lot of the mushrooms have been eaten, and of course, my buddy Larry, who's very knowledgeable on the subject of mushrooms and what eats them. We're squirrels and deer and whatnot. But there's a lot of food sources out there. That we beside, elk and everything else for a predator to eat, there's a lot of food sources out there.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine, for something this size, say a Sasquatch to partake in and eat. What are some of the food sources in this area that, beside the elk, you got deer and everything else. What else out there would you would deem edible, for a Sasquatch?
Yeah, well, this marsh areas that I have, there's a ton of frogs. There's you probably, in the spring, you're stepping on frogs almost. There's a ton of grouse in my area. We flush grouse a lot. So there's plenty of, and squirrels, like you mentioned, rodents. Almost every recording, I have several recording stumps. They're old growth stumps from these old cedar trees because it was a cedar forest at one time. That the stumps are cut off 6 feet up, so that's what I record on. There's freaking all kinds. I always have some kind of small animal running around my recorder at night, living in these stumps. So there's plenty of sources of food, plenty of vegetation. I personally have no problem seeing a couple Sasquatch existing in my area. You know, I don't have a problem seeing it. And hey, you know, it's all hypothesis. It's the type of stuff I think about at night when I'm up there. Is, you know, I would imagine that older elk or you know, winter kill elk would be a source of food for them also. So, and the elk tend to congregate in the area. Most of the elk, if we get some heavy snow, they go down into the valley, and that's where they congregate, and there's usually quite a few winter kills down there. So, you know, I would suspect if I was an opportunistic type predator, omnivore like a bear or such, I would hang out where there's going to be some opportunity, you know.
Yeah. So. Do you, when you're going out to the field, here's a couple of questions for you. Is there anything you do on a regular basis? I mean, do you enter the same way and go out the same way? And also, whereabouts do you place your recorder? Is it low, high? And same thing in regards to your trail cams. Whereabouts do you place those?
Okay, first, I regularly, since July, I go in the same way and usually leave the same way. Since activity is slowed, I'm starting to explore more, and the vegetation's starting to die off, so there's not as much ground cover. You can see a little bit further in there now. So I have plans on doing a little more exploration. There's some areas where I have a feeling that whatever's I'm recording has been hanging out in. I plan on doing a little more searching in those areas. But basically, I had an incident in July where I believe I was roared at, and since then I've just taken to doing the same thing every time, going in the same way, leaving the same way. And I even told, me and Barb talked about it, I said back in August, I said once the activity slows down again and maybe they've moved on or maybe the elk have moved out, I'll start going out again like I was doing in March and exploring the area wider. There's areas that I haven't even been in yet that I've looked at on Google Earth that I want to get down in, the areas that I want to place other recorders in and stuff. So, but for now, I was getting the activity, so there was no real reason to go look for activity elsewhere, and so I just decided to maintain a passive, regular route in and out, because if they are up there, they know me by now, and they're used to what I do. As far as where I place, like I said, I put my recorders, there's all these old growth stumps. My recorders, I put them up in the middle of those, and I build like a little lean-to out of ferns over them to keep the rain off them. And they're probably 6 feet up. And I stick them so my speakers are pointing east to west, and I can get kind of an idea, direction. I'm using 2 recorders now. When I got the money, I'm going to buy a third so I can get a north-south direction on it. But right now I can tell whether the sound that I'm picking up is further east or further west. I've got a good idea that whether they're further south or further north anyways because of the terrain and what's in there. And my trail cams, I have them kind of placed. I have one I climbed up in the tree way high up. It hardly ever gets any pictures. And I think that's more due to the sensor is not, it just, not a lot of stuff is setting off the trigger. I have the majority of them right about head level. And then I have another one that got down low, like knee level on a trail. And actually, I'm going to move one camera next time I'm up and I got time. I want to move one down to a lower level on a trail and just, maybe if it's down lower, they're not going to notice it as quicker. I'd love to get a picture of a Sasquatch foot or leg,
right.
what have you, So I kind of vary those. So
yeah,
just kind of I'm this year has been a total learning experience for me. I plan on being in this area for quite a while, and the only way to really start making real good hypotheses is to record, see what I can't wait till this time next year to see what I've recorded and then compare it to what I recorded this year in the time, the weather, what have you, and stuff.
Yeah, and to me that's real research when you can take an area and learn it inside and out and repeat stuff and look at what's going on in this area. Instead of say you're an active investigator or researcher, but you just hop around a lot, you may get some consistencies and whatnot, but to utilize the area that you're in and study it and realize what's going on there with just the natural known fauna and whatnot, that to me is key. Chris, have you done any historical research on this area? Have you interviewed anybody in close proximity to this area that's had encounters, or you got any background on this area?
Not really. I read. I have Kathy Strain's Giants, Cannibals, and Monsters. That's a freaking phenomenal book, and there's some great stories from the Puyallup tribe and the Yakima tribe. Both tribes utilized the area I'm in. And what's neat about some of their stories, they talk about some of the things I've encountered, the whistling. The Yakimas, in some of their stories, are like, if you hear whistling at night, you're in trouble. Stick throwing. And the word, I can't pronounce it, but the word the Yakimas called these guys were stick throwers or stick Indians. And we had an experience in June where we had what we believe a branch thrown at us, and with all the wood knocking and the where you can hear sticks being thrown and hitting trees next to my recorder at night. That kind of goes along with what the Native Americans are talking about. So, other than reading the Native American stories about the area, I know I grew up here, so I know the whole mystique around Mount St. Helens. My aunt and uncle live in Toutle, and they when I talked to my aunt about this, she a couple months ago, her and my mom came over to my house, and I was playing some of the recordings, and her only comment was, well, she goes, it's kind of common knowledge to us that they're up there. She didn't extrapolate, and I didn't dig deep. It's like, I'm sure there's people that live up in that area that are like that. They know stuff and happens and just don't talk about it.
Right.
I have friends that I talk to. A lot of people I talk to either know somebody that's had an experience or has had an experience themselves, and they just don't talk about it. Actually, a friend of mine just recently saw me. He's always kind of given me a razzing about the Bigfoot thing. He was out deer hunting a couple of weeks ago, and he was sitting on a clear cut, and it dawned on him he was hearing wood knocking from two different, and it freaked him out because he never in his life ever thought about the wood knocking thing until he got to know me. And when he saw him, the next time he saw me, he's like, what the hell is a wood knock, Chris? And I was like, well, it's a wood knock. It's like someone taking a baseball bat to a tree. And he goes, I heard that. I heard it for like an hour going on from two different places on this clear cut. And I go, well, odds are they're talking to each other about you.
Yeah, even with Sasquatch, odds are. And one of the fascinating things about what we refer to as at least I consider it that way, as what we refer to as wood knocks, is that I have found that in some of the areas that I inhabit and research in, a rock on a tree actually makes the same sound, and sometimes the rocks are easier to find than say a stick or a log, because with some of these knocks, and I've heard them in person, I've heard them with friends in close proximity, where if something was hitting a tree that hard, I would almost assume that the limb or whatever would break, the branch or log would break. But a rock, and I've mimicked this, I've tried it, experimented. A rock on a tree can make the same sound, and it's a lot harder to break a rock, and, what can you do with a rock? Well, you can throw it. It's a lot more, something to utilize a rock a lot more profoundly.
Right. I absolutely agree with you. And in fact, there's a difference in some of the knocks that I get. And like a lot of the knocks close to my recorder, you can actually hear the branch break and part of the branch fly off into the other branches. You can hear that whatever is being slammed against the tree break, and you kind of hear it tinkle through the branches of the trees.
Gotcha.
And then, like, my very first wood knock, I call it a wood knock, but it's so loud and profound, I almost think that might have been a rock. And I did in August. There were several recordings where I got what sounded to me like rock clacking, where it was rock on rock. So, and there's rock up there. There's plenty of rock up there. So, you know, there's a hollow quality to some of the knocks that I get that I know is wood on wood, but there's also some knocks I get that I'm pretty sure it's a rock against a tree. So I absolutely agree with you on that. And I've done some experimenting with the knocking thing myself. So I think that some of the communicating that goes on between whoever is doing the knocking, I think the longer range ones that I hear more distant, they're more than likely a rock on a tree versus a branch on a tree.
Yeah, and the reason I bring it up is back in 2011, you know, I had a sighting, and I was with two buddies, and we had 2-night experience, and both nights we had what we called wood knocks. But on the second night, we had, you know, very close proximity to us, knocks, and these knocks you could feel them in your tent. We're talking, you know,
right.
between 30 and 45 yards away. You could feel the ground. I mean, whatever was hitting the tree was hitting so hard. And then, like I said, on the second night, a rock came into our camp. So I have to hypothesize, or at least think about that whatever was hitting the tree with whatever, and this rock came in, that it may have been hitting the tree with a rock and decided to throw it in the camp. It was a softball-sized rock. And the trees up there, when we tried limbs to mimic it, the rock was the closest. And so, and a rock, you know, if you're hunting or what, I mean, in the nature that Sasquatch might, a rock would be the perfect thing to have in your hand. You can carry it around a lot easier. You could hit any tree almost and make a really good sound, whereas you have to find the right size limb and whatnot. So, you know, the wood knocking, I call it rock knocking. I don't know. And the thing, too, on that 2-night experience was we had lots of rock clanking. Sometimes this rock clanking went on for 20 minutes. I mean, at least what I assume was rock clanking. I didn't see a Sasquatch move, but it was, you know, clank, clank. So it makes sense to me that a rock would be utilized more so than, say, a stick or a limb or, you know, whatnot. But I can't rule either or out.
Right. Right. No, I agree with you, and I think I've captured examples of both. You know, and like I said, the one recording that really stands out to me in late March, early April, when a rock was thrown at my recorder. That's what it sounds like, and it's definitely a rock hitting a tree right next to my recorder, and it hit it hard. Something was forced through that rock in the middle of the night at my recorder. And so I have no doubt that rocks are utilized, and not some of the knocks that I get. They're so powerful. It like you said, it would have to be something other than a branch to create it. You know.
Right.
So.
And you know, Chris, you talked earlier about your experience with getting involved in this subject. You talked about Grover Krantz. Grover Krantz is respected by a lot of people. Was definitely a pioneer in this subject. You know, what are your thoughts of Grover Krantz, and how? I mean, did he really help you? Kind of. I mean, what was your lasting, you know, your impression of Grover Krantz, and do you still look at some of the things that he shared with you in class and whatnot? I mean, 'cause that's fascinating. A lot of people would love to be in your shoes and been in the same classroom.
You know, I was 19. I'm 43 now. I wish back then I had tape recorded that lecture, but I didn't know who he was. To be quite honest, he was just a creepy professor. You know, he was very dry. But I was a history anthropology major, so I was probably one of the only people in the class really paying attention, even on the days he wasn't talking about Sasquatch. But he, you know, he really changed, because, you know, me and my dad found those tracks, but I kind of followed my dad's, you know, you look up to your dad, and my dad he just kind of, like I think a lot of people do, just kind of ignores stuff out in the woods, and it just can't be that. When I had that class with Grover, he really made the idea of Sasquatch come to life for me. Up to that point, yeah, me and my dad found tracks when I was a little kid, but, you know, my dad might be right. It might have been just a hunter or whatever. I don't remember exactly what the tracks look like. But after that class with Grover, and the way he explained the Patterson film and the way that animal moves in that film, that's when Sasquatch became real for me, because of him. And I have my copy. He signed the copy of Big Footprints for me. I bought a cast from one of Paul Freeman's cast from the Blue Mountains that has some of the dermal ridges on it from him. I paid $10 for it. I went down to his lab, and he had all these casts, and I got it for $10. And so, you know, and he was the first person up to that point. I never realized that in the Patterson film there were tracks also taken, and that was another thing about, you know, that he pointed out in that film. It's like, if you got hoaxers that are making a suit and putting breasts on the suit. You got hoaxers that are not only making a suit, they're creating, I think there was like 89 or 90 tracks that were end up cast of this animal, and it becomes too complex to be a hoax for me, you know. And so I wish, like I said, I wish I had a tape recorder and recorded that lecture, because I can't remember all of it, but I remember the general ideas and what I took away from it. When I left that lecture, I had no doubt in my mind that Patty was a real animal. So
yeah, and that's really unique to me, and not unique, but fascinating, because Grover Krantz was, to me, a true student of the subject, and also a true researcher. And that brings me to my next question with you is, what do you know, you're fairly new at this. I mean, I guess at least the going out and doing your thing, but what is a researcher? You know, we get there's so much talk about what is a researcher and what do they bring to the field, you know, between, you know, what's an enthusiast and a researcher. You know, sounds to me, Chris, like you are a solid researcher. And I don't mind using the word researcher, because you're researching the subject and you're doing the best you can with what you got, but yet approaching it, you know, with a scientific mind and not jumping to conclusions. You know, Grover was very much that, and so, you know, I think some of what he, you know, you had the joy of being in his classroom. I think it's kind of paid off, and maybe you refer back to him. What is a researcher to you? What does it mean?
That's a good question. You know, I started this for just my personal curiosity, and being in contact with the Olympic Project, and you know, I emailed David Ellis a couple times a week. I'm sure he gets annoyed with me sometimes, but it's become that more important to me to really document what I find and really look at it closely. And it's hard not to jump to conclusions. I mean, there's the stuff I've found and heard. It's pretty darn amazing. It is really amazing to me. And I guess for me, I personally really believe these things exist. I believe that, you know, that they are in my area, but I also now, if I'm going to be a researcher, I gotta be able to show it and take the criticism. I just want to document it and show people what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, and hopefully they get something from it. And if somebody can use whatever I've recorded or what I've documented in the future, that would be great. For me, I do this because I love it. I mean, I've always been a history and anthropology freak. I love the idea of a mystery. I love researching stuff. I love being out in the woods. I love learning about nature. And so doing this just falls right into the stuff that I love anyways. So,
yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question, but
it does wholeheartedly, because I think you're going things about, you're doing things the right way, Chris, and there's a lot of people like you that are doing things the right way as citizen scientists. Some of the greatest discoveries ever made were by citizen scientists,
yep.
and people out there actually doing the field work and doing it diligently and honestly without jumping to conclusions as much as we'd like to sometimes. You don't, because you know that that's not the end product, that's not the end goal, because what's provided is not good enough. You're trying to make it better.
Right.
Jane Goodall is a perfect example. As an uncredentialed citizen scientist that went out and just blew people's minds. You're doing things the right way, and there's a lot of people doing that. And I think those people like you, Chris, I work with, we're Limited Project in the Tillman Forest Group. That's what our goal and aim is, and that's what I think science requires, and I think that's what people really are interested in. Anybody can tell a story, but, to back it up over long periods of time with solid evidence and solid field studies and, collaborating with other people, it adds up to a bigger goal and adds up to a lot of solid foundation. And that,
yes.
What you're doing is killer, and I really appreciate it. Everything you're doing, I really do, man.
Well, I appreciate you guys too. I'm just getting to know everybody, and it excites me when I talk to other researchers and they've recorded or heard the same thing I have. It's stuff like that's exciting to me. It's like, okay, yeah, we can. I'm over here in Southwest Washington. You're up in the Olympic Peninsula, or you're up down in the Tillman Valley, and we're catching some of the same stuff. There's something to that. That means there's something going on here. So, it's exciting.
It is exciting. You're collaborating. We're all, a good majority of us are collaborating with other people, and we're recording some of the same stuff, having some of the same findings, and that is solid data that can be looked at. We're not talking about a minute area where you get one recording or one finding. This is happening across the country, and
right.
The collaboration is key. And I'm really excited because the collaboration is building. In the early years, I don't think there was a whole lot of collaboration. You had a lot of, a lot of dysfunction and opinions, and you still have that now. Don't get me wrong, but there's starting to be this movement where there's collaboration. Okay, well, what do you got? What this group's got this, we got this. Let's work together and share stuff and find commonalities, and I'm seeing that now, and I think 2015 moving forward is only going to get better.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think like the Olympic Project, I didn't know about the Olympic Project till about right after me and my son's experience in 2013, and that's when I was like, okay, here's a group. They're really doing it kind of the scientific way, and that's the way I think. That's the way I want to be. And I think the Olympic Project being out there doing what they do, they've helped people like me who are getting into it take it more seriously and like, hey, it's not just about, making a YouTube video or something. Let's do something with this and cooperate, and let's find out what's actually going on. And I think in the past there's been, like you said, there's egos, there's personalities and all that, and there's going to be stuff like that in every subject. And, unfortunately, it hinders us against the hard science community. So I think with more people doing like what the Olympic Project's doing and you guys, as that grows, I think there's a possibility of accomplishing something and maybe getting more people from the scientific community interested in it. So
yeah, no, well said. I think as much as, this subject's been studied for over 50 years, both by scientists and not. But I think we're still, honestly, I still think we're in our infancy with this subject in studying and trying to figure it out. I really, really do. I think there's new people coming aboard with new ideas, technology is coming into play, and I think some of the endeavors and some of the possible findings can be outstanding. And I'm seeing some of this now. It's trickling in. It's getting exciting. The future to me holds a lot of good things with people like you, Chris, out there, and many other groups out there. There's a lot of other groups and a lot of other individuals that don't share their stuff. But the future is exciting. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's changing, and I think it's gonna do nothing but get better. Honestly, there's just it's like even just my circle in my life, the people in my life, my friends, my coworkers, they're a lot of part of my little secret page where I post my stuff, and people that really had no interest in the topic at all now, they're interested now because like they listen to my recordings and they're like, oh my God, I've heard that and never really thought about that before. I've got friends that I've been out in the woods logging or elk hunting, and I've never seen or heard anything. And then I play a 15-minute clip of wood knocking back and forth. They're like, definitely not a woodpecker. And you know what? I think I've heard that. I think as people, I think, one of my buddies who used to give me a lot of crap, he's all he doesn't even know what to think anymore. Because he thought it was a joke before. He doesn't think it's a joke anymore. So I think more people, if we present our stuff properly and in a rational way, more people are going to be open to looking at it and listening. And more people, maybe when they go out in the woods now, when they hear that crashing wood knock, instead of thinking elk right away, well, maybe something else is going on. Who knows? So.
Who knows?
And I think there's a lot of eyes in the woods, but I think a lot of the eyes in the woods are not paying attention.
Yeah. So. But part of the joy of being out there is just, more than half joy is just being out there in the woods and the wilderness. John Muir, the late John Muir, said, in every walk with nature, one receives more than they can, more than one seeks. So you receive more by going out there, and just getting out there is just half the fun. And so
hiking with a purpose.
Exactly, hiking with a purpose, but enjoying your surroundings, and that is key to me. But hey, Chris, we're short for time here. Gunnar and I both appreciate you joining us. Real quick though, I want to give a shout out to Bigfoot Ground Zero. I know you did an interview with David Helle a couple months back. Fantastic interview. And Bigfoot Ground Zero, folks, is a great podcast to listen to. He's given us a shout out, but I'm not doing this for tit for tat. Fantastic show to listen to, and David really puts on a great show. And he had Chris on there recently. And if you haven't heard it, listen to it, because you'll hear some tidbits that you did not hear here. Yeah,
David's become one of my good friends. I talk to him
he's
quite
awesome
regularly
guy, and I just got to give him a shout out. He does a fantastic job, and he's an honest guy. But Chris, so we're short for time here. I appreciate you joining us this evening, and look forward to your future results, and hopefully have you back on the show shortly.
Yeah, definitely, and I will see you guys at Sasquatch Summit.
Sasquatch Summit, that's
right.
All
right, Chris. Thanks, buddy.
Right on.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great night. Thanks all for joining us here on Monster X Radio. We'll see you again next week. We got a lot of fun things coming up here, and hope you stay tuned, and look forward to having you guys all listen to us again. And thank you so much for joining us. Have a great evening.